lastly, the recommendations and way forward. Next slide, please. Here, Chair, I just want to highlight specifically in terms of what Robben Island is all about. We are Schedule 3A public entity under Sport, Arts and Culture, and also we were established in 1997, as I've indicated, as a cultural institution in accordance with the Cultural Institutions Act of 1999. But I want to quickly zoom into some of the policy mandates as a result of what we are about, and also the added mandate that we are also responsible for, that we have assumed over the years. The first one is that we were designated or declared as a World Heritage Site, which also comes with its own responsibilities under the Department of Fisheries, Forestry and Environment, and this was in 1999, 2 years after we were established. And also, we were declared as a marine protected area, and being declared as a marine protected area in 2019 relates to the fact that we are a controlled zone, and therefore we must comply with the environmental requirements of DFFE, as I've indicated. And perhaps, Honorable Chair and members, it's important to indicate that Robben Island is a 618 hectare land. You know, the island, as you see it, is 618 hectares. And in terms of the area, of that area size, 45% of that land is covered by the built environment, which is houses, your cemeteries, your roads. And key also to mention is because we are a marine protected area, we are also a bird colony in terms of the different bird types, one of them being the endangered species, which is the African penguin. And we also have a responsibility to also look at overall, you know, the requirements of DFFE in terms of the breeding seasons and so forth, and the things that we should not even do, which will be against what DFFE is requiring. And part of that shows the policy mandates that sometimes can have unintended consequences. For example, if birds breed at a particular breeding season, you can't remove them. And as a result, you get droppings on the buildings. And when visitors come, it's perceived as, you know, this place is not looked after. Next slide, please. But perhaps maybe let me touch quickly. I spoke of Robben Island, but we also have the Nelson Mandela Gateway, which is where we are, our departure point for our visitors. We have the Maibuye Archives, which is at the University of the Western Cape, which talks to archival of our heritage documents, tapes. And also we have Jetty 1, which was the initial departure point for the ex-political prisoners, which is in the waterfront, a strategic area, a focus area for us to also consider in terms of leveraging on how we maximize all these, the infrastructure. And also we have the Q501, which is related to our ferries in terms of docking and all the cargo when we take our service providers from DPWI to the island. I won't touch on the vision and mission, but just to highlight that our role is to preserve and promote Robben Island as an inspirational national treasure, a World Heritage Site, which symbolizes the triumph of the human spirit over extreme adversity and injustice. What that means is that given our mandate and responsibility as a World Heritage Site, there are some things that we can't do because we need to preserve the heritage that's on the island in terms of its outstanding universal value. And these are some of also the compliance requirements by UNESCO, which is the body that is responsible for declaring different sites given their history. And therefore, these are some of the implications, as you might see in terms of the budget implications and so forth, but we'll touch on that. Next slide, please. This is just to highlight that from a governance point of view, we have a council that is led by Professor Seth Cooper, and the members, it's 9 members. And then what I just want to highlight here are the committees of council, and one of the committees is the Infrastructure and Facilities Management Committee, just to show the commitment from the leadership of Robben Island in terms of issues that relate to infrastructure and facilities. We have a dedicated committee at council level, and also our executives. We do have a chief infrastructure officer, as she was introduced, who's responsible for all the infrastructure on the island. Next slide, please. This is the slide, Honorable Chair and members and colleagues, that I was referring to, that we have different policy mandates. If you look at the first column, this is what gives existence to Robben Island. We are a cultural heritage site. We drive program 4 of the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, which is heritage promotion and preservation. And we run the cultural and heritage programs, which are currently under the Chief Heritage Officer as part of our structure. And also we have DPWI in terms of the maintenance of this World Heritage Site. I will not go into the mandate because the department is here to speak for, rather into what their responsibilities have been, but also just to show that because we are running a ferry operations or marine operations, there's compliance to that in terms of the International Marine Organization standards. We also need to adhere to SAMSA. Now I'm missing the SA. SAMSA, in terms of the conventions, protocols, policies that go with that. Still, that is compliance, and compliance, as we know, has financial implications in terms of ensuring that you comply. And we also have, because we are running a cultural heritage institution, we also need to be sustainable. And through our sustainability efforts, we are also running the tourism leg in terms of the work that we do. Hence, we also need to comply and align to the plans of the National Department of Tourism through tourism development and support. The last part is the DFFE that I've already referred to in terms of environmental management, conservation and protection. And we also work with the South African National Parks, because some of the things that we are battling with or struggling with, even though that has subsided through the interventions that we have put in place in terms of poaching of the abalone. But the CIO will talk to some of those interventions in terms of how have we fared in terms of trying to deal with that risk of poaching. So concluding this slide, the unintended consequences of the different policy mandates have a serious bearing on the role and the mandate of Robben Island Museum. Next slide, please. So I won't go into detail, but this slide just shows some of the legislative framework and the compliance requirements that we have to abide with from an environment point of view, from a marine pollution point of view, also from an integrated disaster recovery management point of view, such as how do we control the fires and so forth. We can move. I won't go much into this slide, but just to say that RIMS, in line with our current plans, we have 5 strategic goals, and key that relates to the work that the infrastructure unit of RIM and also of the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture, including DPWI, in terms of maintenance, is ensuring that we are supported in the conservation and the maintenance of the natural and also this cultural heritage site, as I've indicated, in terms of the different buildings that we have. But here I'll just skip, but just to indicate that the infrastructure and facilities management program falls under program 1, which is called the business development in terms of the budgeting. So it's important to show this slide so that when the CIO comes in to talk about budget issues, the budget would then come from that program 1, in terms of the budget structure, as per the National Treasury requirements. Next slide, please. This slide now talks to the institutional arrangements in terms of the different responsibilities in managing the infrastructure and facilities on the site. And part of the arrangements is that we are guided and regulated by the Government Immovable Asset Management Act of 2007, which the custodian is the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, who is the authority that is responsible and accountable. But I won't go for asset management, but I won't go into detail because the department is here. And also, what is key is that the department is also responsible for the planning, acquisition, operation, maintenance, and disposal of the assets. But also it may assign or delegate this custodianship to a user department in writing. So these are the governance arrangements and what is entailed in our regulatory or governance instruments. And we also have a tripartite agreement, which were initiatives that were between DSEC, DPWI, and RIM as a way of making sure that there's full oversight on the island in terms of infrastructure and facilities issues. And as a result, over and above that tripartite agreement, which are between the three parties, there's also an overarching interdepartmental service level agreement, which is in relation to the services that are rendered by both the DSEC and the DPWI. And therefore, this tripartite agreement was meant to regulate the relationship between the three parties in relation to the provision of facilities management on Robben Island. However, the tripartite agreement expired in 2020, and the new agreement is in progress. It has not been finalized as yet. And the other important part in terms of governance arrangements is the fact that the delivery model by the DPWI, through that tripartite agreement, it has outsourced the facilities management function to a third party in the form of a total facilities management company. And the process of procuring the TFMC, the department will speak to. Next slide. Also, in terms of the institutional arrangements, Chair and honorable members, it's important to highlight the fact that the work that we do, including infrastructure, over and above the legislation that regulates that mandate and the different responsibilities, we also have plans that guide what we do in relation to infrastructure specifically. The first plan is the integrated management plan, the one that I spoke to when I prefaced the presentation, which is aimed at conservation management of this World Heritage Site and also maintaining the outstanding universal value that I spoke to, and also the heritage protocols as per the requirements of UNESCO, together with the fact that we have a South African Heritage Resources Agency, which requires us that before we even touch any site on the island through infrastructure upgrades or through maintenance, we must get the relevant approvals with regards to, amongst others, the environmental impact assessments, because we are a World Heritage Site. So these are some of the things that we take into consideration, and sometimes they impact on the delivery of the programs and projects, but the CIO will talk to that. We also have an interpretation plan which is aimed at of the different historic sites, which is part of the heritage promotion and preservation, precisely because we spoke about the tourism arm, where the interpretation plan is how we enhance the visitor experience and the numbers that we always see that come to the island, even though during and post-COVID they've dwindled, but we have seen an uptake, and which we are happy about. And also the user asset management plan as per the Guyama Act, which is precisely for infrastructure and facilities management. Key in terms of the risk management, we also have the integrated disaster management plan. And tied to all these plans, there's also frameworks and guidelines, as I've indicated. We do have the Built Environment Conservation Manual, which guides all our assessments and compliance in terms of condition assessments in line with the conservation protocols that we need to adhere to. We also have a waste management plan. We also have an asbestos management plan. And all of these have budget implications where some of the mandates are unfunded by those responsible departments that RIM is expected to deliver on. But because we are always in the cold phase, Chair and the honorable members, in terms of service delivery, some of the interventions, we often reallocate some of the budget, but I wouldn't want to go into detail because that slide or that discussion will follow. Next slide. I won't go into detail. This is the MOU, or the tripartite rather, agreement. In terms of the role of Robben Island Museum, all these points relate to what is it that we are responsible for, and key to those is that whatever that we need to do, it must be approved by the Steercom and the DPWI in accordance with any approved program that we are running in line with the tripartite agreement. We'll move. This slide is just to show the portfolio in terms of infrastructure and facilities on island. We have the engineering and marine systems and services in terms of our plants and system, power, sewer, water and wastage, the harbour itself where we dock, the ferries when we go and depart from the island, we have roads. We also have buildings, a total number of buildings that we have on the island in line with the area square meterage that I spoke to is 479 buildings that we have. And we also have historic sites, the graves that I spoke about, and also the environment in terms of horticulture, landscaping of the island, in terms of specifically its look and feel. Next slide. I think this is the last slide, just to show which buildings are occupied and which ones are vacant, and also the legends on the side show which ones are the churches, which ones are the cemeteries. But the ones in white are the buildings that are not in use currently. But the CIO will talk to the plans that we have. Amongst those is the adaptive reuse project as part of our turnaround plan. Because what we need, we must make sure that over and above the ferrying to the island, there must be what we call supporting activities to lock our visitors longer on the island, because currently they are locked in line with the visit to the prison and all the other areas. I think this is the last slide from my side. Next slide, just to make sure. Yes, thank you so much, Honorable Chair.
Good morning once again. My name is Mapotla Mapwadile. I'll take you through to the rest of the presentation. We're now going to be talking about the REM Infrastructure and Facilities Management Program. And this is the composition of the unit within REM. And it was due to the load, workload that with regards to facilities and maintenance thereof that this division was established. And these are the functions that we currently have. A few of them are vacant. That's something that we're looking to address based on the outcome of our business development model. And then this is how we function in terms of how we execute our works. We have adopted the infrastructure development management systems that was facilitated by DSEC in consultation with the Government Technical Advisory Center. So these are the various steps that we undertake in identifying what is it that needs to be done on the island in terms of planning, the program management, the feasibilities and all of that, identifying what the project management structure is going to be like, who's going to play part at what point in the execution. And then the handover part of it, the operations and management and maintenance of the work that has been completed, and that would be carried out by DPWI through the TFMC company or contractors that they have availed to REM to execute those works. Then we, due to lack of maintenance for a while, DSEC intervened and directed some of the funding that was going to DPWI directly to REM to execute capital projects. And this next slide, the allocation as per 2020-21 financial year, you can see how it has evolved right up until where we are now, where we have a balance of about 59 million that is fully committed to execute the projects that we are going to be highlighting in the next slides. Basically, these projects were backlog projects from the then previous TFMC company, Hout, and then we are addressing those issues. Some of these have been completed as we speak, and some are ongoing, and these are the budget allocations for each of those. Of importance is the project number 4, the wastewater treatment plant. That hasn't been undertaken or rolled out. It's still at legislation stage in terms of finalizing the permits that are needed, the EIAs, and the desalination plant is one such as well, a technical project that we are undertaking. That one we're going out to market to get the qualified contractors to bid for that project. Next slide. The projects that I alluded to, it's the bulk infrastructure. Like I said in the budget slide, these are DPWI backlog from the previous TFMC. However, then DSEC diverted funds to RIM for us to implement the restoration, rehabilitation, and upgrades of the buildings as well. Because there's no TFMC, we're undertaking those works through the funding that's available, so as the minor repairs and maintenance. Point number 4, horticulture, landscaping, and other relevant services. These works used to be undertaken by DPWI as well. However, when Hout left, it just stopped. So then DSEC availed some funds for RIM to execute. However, RIM found itself now having to absorb some of those general workers that were employed by Hout, and to date we're still not receiving any assistance from DPWI or anybody. That's an operational cost that RIM has found itself absorbing in the previous years up until now, which is still the status quo. And then part of our intervention as well, we have planned and ongoing CAPEX projects for this financial year running all the way to 2025-26 financial year. However, we have put in place a framework of external consultants to assist us in rolling out these programs, because internally there isn't enough capacity to do so. And then we have a proposed way forward. So these are the projects that I spoke about, the bulk infrastructure components, the wastewater treatment plant, the scope and the budget allocation and where we are in the process. Like I said, we're still awaiting SARA permits for the EIAs. However, we will be executing that in due course this current reporting financial year. And then the desalination plant, that's our program there in terms of execution right up until final completion. This project is completed. It's part of our heritage, the Bluestone Quarry Wall. Due to COVID, there was some lag in time in terms of finalization. However, late last year, we managed to conclude. And these are the before and the during the construction and the current state that it's in. The maximum security prison, the hospital section. This is what it used to look like in previous years, about a year and a half ago, and this is the current state. So these are the remedial interventions that we are currently undertaking through the grant that we got from DSEC. that's some of the progress in terms of surveillance, CCTV. This is one project where now, if all stakeholders were assisting RIM as per the legislation and mandates, DFFE would come in terms of surveillance, but RIM is fully funding this operation on its own without any assistance from external stakeholders. These are the houses that were run down, and the before and the after in terms of the look and feel. I'll give this slide to the CHO to present the horticulture and the other relevant marine and environment issues.
Okay, thank you very much, CIO, and thank you very much, Chairperson, the Chairperson of the Council. Let me first preface this by saying that the CEO has indicated that Robben Island is a World Heritage Site, and you have, in your opening address, indicated that Robben Island is very, oh, okay. No, thank you very much. Let me continue to say that in your opening address, Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee, you have indicated that Robben Island is very important for South Africa. And the CEO indicated that Robben Island is a World Heritage Site, which is very important. And I want to indicate that within the World Heritage Committee, which we report to through the DFFE, there are protocols that are supposed to be followed, but they also have got their own way of doing things. The first one being that there is what we call reactive monitoring. You have mentioned the issue of media reports and articles in the newspapers. So they get that information from the public, and they see it on national television, on websites, and they take action by coming to any site. So since 2005, there was a UNESCO reactive monitoring because of what we have indicated in terms of the newspapers' negative publicity. And the UNESCO World Heritage Committee came to South Africa, and they monitored Robben Island in their so-called reactive monitoring. And they came up with a report which recommended and found out that our gardens, our open spaces and cemeteries were invaded by alien invasive plants and weeds, and further indicated that these issues should be addressed. And in 2011, after the Public Protector report, in response to the outcry from tourists and of course from the general public, the UNESCO sent a second reactive monitoring mission to South Africa, and they came up with a report with recommendations and directives to Robben Island as to what is it that is supposed to be done. And most of the things were done, and one of them was that Robben Island should develop an integrated management plan, which the CEO has indicated. That one has been done, and it also focuses on issues of conservation of the built infrastructure. And in 2013, DPWI left the island, and by that time there were 30 general workers who were assisting doing the horticultural work on the island and maintenance. And RIM had to take over the funding of that project and also takes over the landscaping program, which remained a challenge. And in 2015, KUHA left, KUHA in fact was contracted to be the implementing agent for the facilities on the island. And in 2018, the very same KUHA's contract expired, and the funding of the horticulture program also ended. leaving Robben Island with a burden in terms of whether to take over the 30 employees or reduce the number of employees to do the landscaping and also technical services on the island, because the island should always be clean. And then currently the landscaping program is underfunded with only 7 out of 30 general assistants that we had during the time of DPWI. And RIM has to raise more than 4 million rands per annum to implement the program. For instance, to purchase equipment, for salaries and also for training. And then the alien invasive program should be accelerated and funded to mitigate fire risks. And there is an urgent need, for instance, now to plant indigenous trees on the island. And this is going to improve the site as adaptation to climate change, to improve resilience on the site, and also waste management on the island should also include addressing marine pollution and also removal of debris that accumulate on a regular basis around the island shoreline. Let's go to the last slide from my side. And what I want to present here is about what needs to be done moving forward, especially on integrated disaster risk management, because currently the site is vulnerable to fire, disasters, and there is an urgent need, for instance, to accelerate the fire risks mitigations, that is reduce fuel load, plant indigenous trees, and also improve preparedness. Especially we need to train firemen, procure PPE and a fire truck, and also ensure that the island is manned at all times, and ensure that reliable water supply at strategic points for adequate response to fire disasters, and have a contingency fund for both the risks and oil spill disaster that might happen at any given time. And lastly, that we have to plant less combustible indigenous plants, because if you plant any other tree, they might catch fire very quickly. So those are the things that we think should be done moving forward. Thank you very much.
Okay. CEO earlier on mentioned the agenda in terms of utilizing currently unused buildings or partially unused, or those that are being used, fully optimizing the usage of them. And we've divided the 2 programs. Program 1 is the adaptive reuse. It includes rehabilitation, restoration, and upgrades of these buildings and external spaces as well, just so that we diversify our product offering, because currently we just have the general tour. Beginning of last year, we also included the walking tour. But if we unlock the potential in this infrastructure facilities, then we would be able to offer more products and hence have repeat customers and overnight stays on the island. This will be in partnership with various stakeholders in the hospitality industry, possibly not through triple Ps, but through concessions. We are reworking the terms of reference. We have roped in Infrastructure South Africa to assist us, especially on the green projects that are going to be aligned with unlocking potential into these projects in terms of generating power, having green transportation on the island, those sort of things. So also from a capacity point of view in terms of the investment that calculating how it is that we will, or how long it will take for us to recoup that return on investment, the capital outlay. And program 2 is just your general replacement, repairs and maintenance of the buildings that ended up as being capital projects due to lack of assistance from our stakeholders in terms of having planned maintenance, executing planned maintenance instead of now reactive and potentially leading now to full-on capital projects. And then CEO mentioned Jetty 1. That's another project that we are undertaking this current financial year, right here on the V&A waterfront. It has a lot of history, and we are unlocking that narration for the public to familiarize themselves with the story of Robben Island from the departure point. And then the next slides are going to highlight the current challenges that we're facing. We have overall challenges. That is lack of agility and responsiveness from the contractors, temporary contractors that are appointed by DPWI. They struggle to get the go-ahead or instruction for them to execute the calls that we log. And so there really isn't much monitoring and management from DPWI's end. However, they assured us that this will change going forward. There's also insufficient funding to meet the substantial infrastructure needs. CHO alluded to the horticulture component of the island, that we are finding ourselves having to use our operational budget to fund those works. And then there are also inherent inefficiencies in the arrangement evidenced by the delays in the TFMC contract. They were supposed to have been boarded November 2021. We're sitting in April 2023. We're still waiting for that to happen. So also non-participation of other key stakeholders, like we alluded before, DFFE and the Department of Public Transport. Currently we have impeccable roads on the island. They're tarred or they're paved. There's not a pothole in sight, and that's RIM maintaining those. We have a fleet of vehicles there that each buses and your vans, each one we have to renew their license on a yearly basis at a cost of close to 23,000. So that as well, no assistance from the Department of Transport. We have a ferries operations, 2 of those of our vessels, moving our visitors to and back from the island to mainland. The only transport body that we engage with, and only from a legislative perspective, is SAMSA. Other than that, there's no assistance. And then bulk services infrastructure, power supply. Currently, we have a PV plant on the island. However, we're not able to optimize it fully because of the battery storage capacity. DSEC, again, have come to our rescue. They've availed funds for us to augment that battery capacity. So we are going to be procuring an additional battery that will assist us in capturing and storing the power that's generated during the day so that it's released during the night, and also with the assistance of the generators that we do have on the island. However, some of those generators haven't been maintained for a while, and they've packed up. Some of them, we haven't used them in how many years?
Currently, there's one generator that is been decommissioned, generator 6.
Yeah.
But for the longest period, past 2 years to 3,
Yeah.
there's been issues where they were on and off, which created the
Yeah. So then it's it disconfigures the way that diesel is being used, because now we are depending on the generator that consumes more diesel. But if all these other generators, which are a bit high tech in terms of diesel consumption, if they were fully working as they're supposed to, then we wouldn't be going through diesel at the rate that we are. The idea is for us to cut down on those diesel costs, because that's coming from our OPEX budget as well. And then a recent crisis that we're still in the midst of is the water availability on the island. The current desalination plant is fully out of commission. We are ferrying water on a bi-monthly basis to the island, potable and non-potable, at a cost to RIM. And we've also had to resuscitate some of the boreholes that we have to assist us in distributing water to staff that are there for the ablutions that the visitors use when they're there, and the general contractors. So it's not an ideal situation that we're finding ourselves in. DPWI have availed to us a contractor, DPWI, Allfix, who is not getting any assistance from DPWI. So that they're left to their own devices in terms of maintenance of that desalination plant, and that's probably why it packed up as well. So so far we have spent 1.3 million rands just ferrying water to the island at interval, 2-week intervals. So the proposed way forward is the STECO agreement between RIM, DSEC, and DPWI that last year, February. We haven't engaged since then. Should be reinstated immediately. This is almost kind of, I think, our first sitting, because I'm beginning to put names and faces together now, the people that partake in those STECO meetings. So let's reinstate that sitting and see how we can all work together cohesively and protect Robben Island. And the DPWI will brief us on progress with regards to the TFMC. And then obviously we want more accountability from DPWI as the sole custodian of the island. We would appreciate your concerns and going over and above board in terms of making sure that the island is always in a good state. We will assist in any way that we can. And also funding for horticulture and landscaping. Currently, we really are struggling, especially in the summer months, where Cape Town weather, we know there isn't much rain and it's very dry, so it looks a bit down when you visit the island in summer. But then again, in winter, everything is green and lush, but then there are weeds everywhere and very limited staff to undertake that work. So we do need that assistance, and we plead with DPWR to come to the table. And also involvement of DFFE as a key stakeholder, especially when it comes to disaster risk management services. Perhaps the portfolio committee can then go back and try to nudge DFFE to take a more active role in the protection of Robben Island. And then the committee, again, this is what we are asking of you to relay when you go back, in terms of REM being afforded a bigger chunk of the budget allocation for us to mitigate all these risks that we're currently facing. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily have to be budget, but it could be capacity in terms of human manpower. And then also assist in bringing on board those key stakeholders that we spoke of, your likes of Department of Transport, DFFE. NDT, we have a very good relationship with them. In fact, we meet on a monthly basis and are funding some of our projects through the Destination Development Program. So that relationship is well and good. And yeah, that's the end of the presentation.
Chair, that's the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, CEO, and to your team for a detailed, well-prepared presentation. We will then ask DPWI to present
you and your team, DDG Quebeca, and our team from Public Works. My name is Chris Lombard. I'm the DDG for Facilities Management. I will make high-level introductory remarks, and in the absence of our previous project leader, left with the Cubans that returned after their contract expired, I've got here with me Advocate Nishi Sharma. She's well versed in the project and the history of the project. I will ask her to do the detailed presentation. From my end, I will give you some highlights from what I saw. And luckily, we had discussions with our team members, first preparatory meetings on Tuesday, because we wanted to be on the same page, and I think we managed it. The realities are what they are as presented. We have to acknowledge certain things. Certainly, the steering committee has not been effective, and is putting it together has been pedestrian, to say the least. And getting to the memorandum of understanding, the so-called tripartite agreement, to be finalized, has also taken long. I'm excited to report to you this morning that I've just recently seen a letter from our DG to Dr. Kumala that was signed on the 19th that requests the acting DDG to look at the memorandum that has been completed. It's been going to and fro for about 6 months. Advocate Nishi, we've now finally got to a document which is feasible, workable, and then will be shared obviously with the CEO and going forward. So that I can report on, which will be helpful. So from a facilities management side, we discharge our services in different ways. At the head office level, we are responsible for the TFM, my office specifically, and that is specifically also why Advocate Sharma has taken over the responsibility in the absence of our predecessor. On that score, I want to report that, as agreed, and we made presentations to the CEO and the team last year in the third quarter of the financial year, and we were all very excited about what was going to happen on the TFM. On that very day, we agreed to certain principles, and we've put the TFM to the procurement process, and we were successful. Only when it got to NBAC, we realized that the preferred service provider was not compliant. We've now gone out to the process again, and the detail will come out from the presentation. Advocate Chalma will share with us, but we hope to have it done and dusted and implementation by July. Detail will be shared with you. So on the governance side, these things will be put together, CEO and DDG and the team from your end and DSAC, because in addition, I need to stress that we have struck up a good relationship with you. The fact that things have gone wrong in this way and that way, we must acknowledge it and put it right. And I want to compliment the region and DSAC and pertaining to at the regional level, the meetings that have gone on. Maybe it's not that effective as yes, but CIO can honestly report that we will look at it and beef it up. The reports I'm receiving, meetings are happening at a quarterly and monthly level. There are POE for those meetings. Having said that, doesn't say that implementation takes place in the way that it should be. Let's acknowledge that. Let's bring our teams together. The presentation will share with you issues of TFM. It will share with you the other part of how we discharge our services to the regional office pertaining to day-to-day maintenance. It will talk a bit about funding, which is something that the committee needs to know, and all of us that are involved in the tripartite relationship. And then there will be a way forward, which will be shared with you, and I'll come in to make final remarks. Thank you very much, Chairperson, members of the committee, council, and the rest of the colleagues.
Good morning, Chairperson, honourable members, Chairperson of the Council, member of the Council, all management from respective entity and departments. I'm going to run through the presentation on behalf of Department of Public Works and Infrastructure. It's a combined presentation for both the regional office and head office in order to give you a sense of where we were, where we are, and where we need to go. So just to give our chairperson and honourable members a bit of background, I think the CEO has contested to this already in terms of the value that Robben Island has as a World Heritage Site. And I believe that due to this, we have to ensure regular and continuous maintenance on the island to portray to the rest of the world the layers that has been giving rise to the nomination and acceptance as a World Heritage Site. So, yes, the CEO has mentioned it already, Department of Public Works and Infrastructure is the custodian of the island. And until 1996, the maintenance on the island was done by DPW personnel. So they were mainly actually based at the island and providing first-hand support there. And many of them were qualified artisans, horticulturalists. I think that was highlighted as a huge challenge on the island, and gardeners. And unfortunately, these staff actually left the department between 1996 and 2002. And also, due to the National Department of Public Works at the time, policy and structural arrangements of most of these skill posts could not be filled because there were challenges faced there, and there were fundamental changes that led to the lack of resources and skilled capacity.